Alright, hi there listener, my name is Kelvin Norman and you're listening to Seedpod, a podcast about forests, hosted by 3 scientists and managers. Before we get started, let's introduce our hosts.
My name is John. I am a forester in the Midwest.
I'm AJ. I'm a wildlife biologist in the Southeast.
And I'm Kelvin. I'm a forester in the Mid-Atlantic. Okay, before we get started with anything, we have to do our disclaimer. Everything in this podcast is strictly the opinions of the host and does not reflect those of our employers. Before we get into our topic for today, which is invasive species, we're gonna just start with the topic of invasive species. We need to have our Forest Minute. For our new listeners, the Forest Minute is where we check in with each other and we talk about a neat experience we had with the woods this week. John, what was your Forest Minute for the week?
This is less to do about the woods and more just to do with where I'm at in the season right now. I've rounded the corner on my tree planting projects this year, so I had scheduled to do approximately 24,000 seedlings, and I am down to the last 3,000. So I've gotten 20,000 seedlings in the ground, and so it's just a sense of accomplishment, and so it's just a weight off my shoulders. I have tendonitis. I've got planter's elbow, but it's basically just it's tennis elbow from planting so many trees. So I have my war wounds now, and I'm ready to be done with it. So that's
Awesome.
the highlight.
Awesome.
And it's all new forest land plantings or restored area plantings. It's not like timber harvest or something like that. It's all, going into a creek buffer, which to protect creeks from herbicide drift and runoff. So
That's quite
stuff.
What's the predominant species you're planting?
As many oaks as I can fit in it. No maples. We got a couple of maples nearby that'll seed in a minute. A lot of eastern white pine, just because I like having them as like thermal cover species.
Oh, hell yeah!
A lot of our owl species, I think, have found to really like it. And yeah, so like 2/3 oak, 1/3 other hardwoods, and then like just a little sprinkling of pine clumps, basically scattered throughout.
Did you throw any dogwoods in there?
Yep, dogwoods are
Nice.
the shrubs are coming in this week,
Oh,
hopefully. So they're gonna get slammed in the ground here real quick in some gaps where I just skipped or something like that. So
I love
Yeah,
me some
it's
dogwoods.
literally everything in the state of Iowa, like native trees list, even stuff from like like I'm in the northern chunk of the state, and like I did my own version of assisted migration and just grabbed some stuff and moved it up. So like shingle oak is the really big one that's probably going to move north with us. So put that one in the planting mix as well. A couple of swamp chestnut again just for fun. But yeah,
Nice.
whole bunch of everything.
Swamp chestnut oak is a neat looking tree. I haven't really
is.
seen it. Just the pictures of it. Looks neat though.
Yeah, they're cool. I like them.
All right, AJ, what was your Forest Minute?
Mine. I mean, I don't know. I could. Yesterday, I floated down one of the rivers here. First time I'd gotten to really take a day off and do that, which was nice. Saw a lot of invasive species and other stuff. But it was just nice to get out and be out in, not the woods obviously, but in nature, let's say, and not be working. But on the work side of it, I mean, we've just been rocking and rolling through burn season, so we've been doing a lot of really good prescribed burning lately. Hammering stuff in the growing season now, and really just kicking ass and taking names. It's been awesome.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. So my fun woods minute here, we're doing an interesting riparian planting as well. So we're planting in the high quality trout stream. Owned by a water company and had some issues with forest health things, and they're having us put in about a dozen native species of tree. Because there's a lot of deer, we got to do deer fencing, and they're also worried about flood damage, and the flood's taking away the trees that we're putting in the ground. So we're putting in these massive posts. They're 2 inches by 2 inches by 60 inches long. I feel like I'm getting ready to form like a Shiltron and like repel a charge of knights when I'm carrying these things around. Because they're just really
that's
thick
massive.
and long and sharp. And when we're putting them in the ground, we have to be very careful not to like accidentally destroy the root systems of the plants. in these things. It's 2 posts per tree, and then a 6-foot tall woven wire fence around it.
Yep.
That is.
So we did those. We did one similar in an area that someone was doing like an oak savanna restoration for, on a sandier soil, which was awesome. But so easy, super easy digging. But those cages. Oh man. Thank God they were pre-made and dropped off the site like a day before. But we had to do T-posts and cages. And that was.
I would take the T-posts. These stakes are really heavy. I can carry 5 at a time, and that's it. I got 4 on one shoulder, 1 on the hands. It's a lot. It's a lot. I do have another fun wood story. I was coming back from the gym yesterday, and I saw some of my neighbors were planting some trees in their front yard. They had planted 2 maples and were working on a 3rd oak, and they had planted them high, so the root systems weren't totally in the ground, and they also had left a planting stake in. And so I stopped and I gave them some advice about how to plant trees and not kill them. So that was fun.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm just a wandering tree Ronin, teaching people about forests and trees. Okay, that was our lovely forest minute. So now we go into our second segment, which is invasive of the episode. AJ, do you want to introduce?
Meow, meow.
Yeah. Meow, meow, meow. AJ, do you want to introduce our invasive of the week?
Yes. So our invasive of this week, because I saw a shitload of it yesterday, Chinese tallow tree, or many other common names. I'm sure. I don't actually know any other ones besides that and popcorn tree.
Yep, popcorn tree.
There's probably others, but we'll leave those off. What did we decide the pronunciation of the Latin name was? Triadica sebifera. We'll go with that.
Yep.
Boom.
Triadicia sebifera.
Sure.
And so that's my Latin, which is church Latin, because I was raised Catholic. And so it's probably wrong from scientific Latin, because those are 2 different languages. Church Latin is more informed by Italian than, I guess, Roman history. Anyways, it's, different story for a different day.
Yeah,
2 different languages, both dead.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, listeners, so the fun thing about Latin is, with scientific Latin, you could say however the heck you want, because there's no right and or wrong way to say it.
Exactly.
And
we are not linguists.
Nope.
Oh God, no. My wife, she's also a forester, and she will say, "Oh, John, what about this Latin name tree?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but that's definitely a box elder or something like that." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "It's like talking past each other. It's great."
The best one I had recently was bald cypress. I've always called it Taxipodium distinctum, and then I heard someone say Taxipodium disticum, and I was like, that's a better pronunciation. I'm going to use disticum from now on.
Disticum, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
Distetchum.
back to Chinese tallow.
Yeah, back to Chinese tallow.
We can stay on task. Yeah. What to say about it? It's one of the earliest flowering trees, which some people like. A lot of folks with honeybees and stuff, But again, we could go on a rant about honeybees too.
Oh, that's a later. That's actually an episode we have scheduled.
I'm adding it to the spreadsheet right now.
So I know a lot about Chinese tallow because I did my master's working on Chinese tallow.
Take it away.
It is a small to medium invasive tree that is found across the southeastern United States, from as far north as Maryland all the way down to Texas. The largest Chinese tallow that I have seen grows about 80 feet tall and was found in Mississippi.
That is insane.
It was a huge one. So it tends to be a small to medium-sized tree, getting between 30 and 40 feet tall. It's a highly flood-tolerant tree. It also doesn't care about salt water. And the other fun thing that we're going to get into a lot more later is it doesn't really seem to have a shade tolerance. So if you read books about it, you'll read that it is shade intolerant. And I will contend that is in fact a lie, because I have found it in full shade growing across the southeastern United States.
All over the place in fully shaded, river bottoms.
Yeah.
Shade intolerant. Get out of here.
Yeah. So that's one of the, so generally speaking, when on the subject of invasives, when people say, "Oh, it's shade intolerant with an invasive species," I found that it has to be taken with a ginormous grain of salt. A lot of the stuff that I've found that's they'll say, "Oh yeah, it's shade intolerant. All you need to do is the cultural treatments to increase the shade, and it'll be mostly fine, or it'll reduce the density or something like that, or it'll get rid of it completely. But like I have found a lot of shrubs that are, that needs full sun to survive. I'm like, no, I've got it. It's every 10 feet out here. It may be smaller, but like it's definitely here and it's definitely producing seed.
Yeah.
Maybe
not a ton of seed, but
maybe that comes from it's sort of shade intolerant in China. Because everything else in that ecosystem can outcompete it, and that's, it all comes together to say, like, yes, this is shade intolerant in this setting, but when it's invasive, it ain't. That's the only thing I can think of. Because you see that with all kinds of invasive species.
We'll get into this discussion in a second here. Let's finish describing Chinese tallow. So the leaves are ovate to cordate, so kind of heart-shaped. They look a lot like aspen leaves to me. The margin is entire. They're thick, waxy leaves. And the thing that really sticks out about Chinese tallow are the seeds. It has a pretty large seed pod. That is, so the flowers are a long chain of white flowers, which do come out early, and that's why honeybee keepers like them. We're going to talk about honeybee keepers in a second here. And then it produces a large capsule fruit. So it's green. That green fruit matures to be dark brown to almost black, and that opens up, and there's this white-looking bean in there. It's not a bean. I think it's technically a drupe. It's got a hard waxy coating, and then inside the wax coating is bright white, and so eventually the capsule falls off. And you just have those three bean-looking guys in there, and that's why it's called popcorn tree, because it looks like there's popcorn hanging out in that tree. It's not. It's a waxy fruit. So that waxy fruit is actually why Chinese tallow, one of the reasons why Chinese tallow was initially imported into these United States. It was imported a couple of times in China. The seeds are collected and they're melted down to make candle wax. And so the idea was, you could have a candle and soap making industry across the Southeast. All you got to do is pick, the beans off these trees. So it was imported a couple of times. One of the times it was imported to make candle wax. Other times as a street tree because it grows just about anywhere. It's, like I said, highly salt tolerant. So, if you're in one of these port cities in the young United States, kind of nice to have this tree. It's going to grow anywhere. Going to grow pretty fast. So that's why it was imported. Okay. Anyway,
real quick,
yeah.
Do you know? Is there any? Because I've always heard this story, but I've never actually looked into it.
Oh yes.
Was the initial importation into the United States done by Ben Franklin?
No, it wasn't. Done by Ben Franklin.
Or encouraged by him.
He definitely wrote about it, but it wasn't done by him. It was done by some Southern gentleman in the early 1700s. One of the initial introductions. It was introduced several times. It is also found in Southern California. But another big driver so it was initially imported in like 1773-ish. And then it was also imported by the USDA Foreign Plants Bureau, who was trying to, quote-unquote, improve the ecosystems and natural resources of the southeastern United States.
I wish we could stop trying to improve things.
1800s.
That sounds about right.
Couple of introductions. All right.
Gotta stop improving things.
So Chinese tallow does very well post-disturbance. If you have a natural ecosystem, it's going to do poorly. Yep. All right, I'm done.
What is a disturbance?
So disturbance is anything that puts holes in the canopy. So it really does well post-hurricane because it's very salt-tolerant and very flood-tolerant. So that kills the wind, knocks down a bunch of trees. Chinese tallow stump sprouts, so it just comes back post-disturbance, post-hurricane, and then it comes up, and then the seeds are able to spread and move around, with the flood water. The other fun thing about Chinese tallow is that the root system is really active and alive, so you can't kill it by burning it. In my master's, we did some experiments where we burned it like 3 times in spring. We had some nice hot growing season burns. We top killed the trees all the time, but then they just pop back from that root system. So the best way to kill it are herbicides. Herbicides. Best way to kill it.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those, because of that extremely active root system too. It's one of those ones that if you cut it down or you bust the top off of it or top kill it, not only does it re-sprout from where it broke off from, but all of those shallow what are they called, like runner roots, the very very surface level roots, those little fuckers will also sprout up all over the goddamn place.
Oh yeah.
So kind of like an aspen.
Very similar to an aspen.
Okay, that's been like 15 minutes of Chinese tallow because I did my master's working on Chinese tallow. But anyway, Chinese tallow. There's a tree for you.
It's bad.
Yeah. Okay.
It's bad, folks.
So we kind of use that as an introduction into the heart of our episode today, which are invasive species and what they are. So before we jump into the whole thing about invasive species and all that stuff, let's talk about why we care about invasive species. So not that any of us think about, on this podcast, any of us think about ecosystems just for the monetary value, but just to put a monetary value on it. We know that invasive species have done roughly 1.28 trillion dollars in damages, as of an estimate in 2017. The annual mean cost of the damage done from invasive species is a little over 162 billion dollars a year, and the authors of that study would be DeGain et al., published in 2021, say that is a gross underestimation. So invasive species are really damaging from an economic standpoint. They change whole ecosystems. We're going to talk through a couple of points just with a couple of specific examples. Terrible things to have, terribly damaging to ecosystems.
Real quick, do you know offhand, is that estimate based on actual dollar value lost, from agricultural and other,
Yep.
Or is that also factoring in, the kind of more wishy-washy dollar values of like ecosystem services?
It's more from the USDA recorded value,
expenditure. So that's even more strongly underestimated.
Yeah.
If you start considering things like ecosystem services and all that.
Yeah,
and so
because they're probably just doing yields on a soybean acre for some sort of amaranth or whatever.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's an interesting study that they tried to estimate this value, and when you read through it, it's like, man, what about this and what about that? And the authors tell you straight out, like, hey, we're going to grossly underestimate. We're just trying to put numbers on it. So just listener, in case you're unfamiliar with ecosystem services, those are the things that ecosystems do for people that we, in a capitalist society, don't value in a monetary sense. I said that really weird. We don't put a monetary value on, so that would be like clean water and clean air.
Water quality is the easiest, I think, example.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to remember too is like it's also, even if you try to put a dollar amount on it, it's really difficult to truly nail down. Because there's just so much, like, we talk about it a lot. Like, forestry is literally taking a round thing and trying a round tree and trying to make it into a square product. Like, we're trying to apply a lot of structure to what is varying forms of chaos, and like it's really difficult to nail it down. So it's definitely. I'm reading the note that you have here, Calvin, and it's a 3-fold increase per decade.
Yep.
So what? That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it gets worse every few years, though. Just gets worse. Yeah.
Sorry, apparently my version of Microsoft 365 is ad supported. Fuck.
I just got that same thing.
Yeah. God damn it.
Okay, so
I'd like to return to work. Fuck Microsoft.
So another reason that we care about invasive plants is they change ecosystems and hurt humans. So we're going to talk about how we define invasive plants in a second. Hurting humans is definitely one of them. So in the Maui fires, it was at 2023, 2024? 2024. 23.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, the Maui fire, the Maui fires, that was largely fueled by colonial land management practices and patterns, as well as invasive species. These were invasive grasses that were imported because they look pretty ornamentally. Woo-woo.
It was 2023 for the record.
Okay, 2023. I thought it was 2023. Yeah, so those had a lot to do. The spreading of those fires had a lot to do with invasive grasses. I think it was pampas grass. Might be wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that, your boy out here. I feel so good about that one.
So, I mean, I don't want to take it away from you, but like 9 times out of 10, it is all like there are so many pampas grasses and varying like surprisingly Southern American grasses that we've moved up here that are really good at growing in semi-tropical areas and grasslands.
Yeah.
As well.
So. Hawaii's a fantastic place to be most plants, so it's probably going to do well
though.
there. So what happens is the plantations that have been closed have been invaded by invasive plants, and those carry fire really well. Another great example of a non-native plant that carries fire really well is Melaleuca in Florida. Really, it burns super hot. Also, eucalyptus in California, really fantastic at burning. They burn a lot hotter and more intensely than native plants do. So they can just change entire fire cycles. And when they do, they threaten, homes and where people live. So, yeah, invasive plants. We need to care for a lot of reasons, not just because ecosystems are cool and neat. Okay, while we're still introducing invasive plants, let's just have a quick chat about how many invasive plants there were. So you guys can see the notes, so don't look at the notes. Quick guess how many invasive plants there are in these United States.
I would have said at least 2,000.
I was going to say, I would guess
plants?
about 2,000. Oh, just plants?
Yeah.
Or all?
No, just plants.
Oh, okay.
Just plants.
Okay.
Yeah, 1,500.
2,000.
Hey, 1,500 right on the nose. As of 2023, we have 1,500 plants in the continental United States. Hawaii's got more. So just for where they're found most, so if we're looking at what places have the most invasive plants, the Midwest has 52% of invasive plants. The Northeast, 45%. The Southeastern United States is at 33%. Now, here's where we get to have a little fun. What is the Southeastern United States? For the purposes of this study, they did everything that touched the Atlantic Ocean, so Maryland, Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. Everything on the Gulf that we called that South Central United States, they had 45% invasive species.
Interesting.
So wait, they're even counting like Tennessee as the Midwest?
Tennessee, they counted it as South Central.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, weird region, but Gulf states.
Yeah, that's a weird...
Yeah, Gulf states. Great Plains, 12%. Doesn't surprise me too much because that's a tough place to be a plant. It's really dry there. The Intermountain West, 6%. The PNW came back with 19%. Pretty uninvaded in the PNW. California, only 11%. Hawaii, 70% invaded. Really fantastic place to be a plant. And then Puerto Rico did not make the map because colonialism. But I know Puerto Rico's really invaded.
I was gonna say, I imagine part of it is it's a island, and it's a small island, and it's a nice island for humans to be in. Like, if it's hurricanes notwithstanding, and volcanoes and all that other stuff, but like generally speaking, it's mellow weather, it's good rain. It can be hot, but like it's a good place for humans to be. Unlike I'm looking at North Dakota. No one wants to be in North Dakota.
Well.
Hey, I worked in North Dakota. It was nice.
I interviewed for a job in North Dakota. It did not seem like a great place to be a forester. In eastern North Dakota?
Ooh,
no.
At that point, just move to Minnesota.
The other nice thing about Hawaii is that there's a number of different elevations and ecosystems. So, you can get everything from desert plants to tropical plants there to some higher elevation stuff. So, Hawaii, fantastic place to be an invasive plant. You got all kinds of niches open up. So, that's where we can find invasive plants. There are lots of other things that are invasive, and we're just going to put those to the side for right now. We could do later episodes on invasive fishes. One that's really famous are both the Asian carp, which is there's like 6 species that we call Asian carp, as well as snakeheads. Done some work on snakeheads. Mm-hmm. They're real fun if you're into invasive things. They're not fun if you're a native fish.
The plethora of invasive mollusks too.
Oh yeah,
just so many of them.
Yeah. So any organism has the capability of becoming invasive. It's it's a question. There's a number of things that get in the way of things becoming invasive, which we'll talk about in a second here. So anything can be invasive. So let's just talk about our spectrum of invasion. All right, so guys, is every single non-native organism invasive?
No.
Oh, fantastic. This is what you get when you work with professionals. They know the answer to the questions. This was supposed to help set us up for a transition here. Okay.
No, so I mean,
Yeah.
this is the one that I debate back and forth with myself, and basically, like, what I've come down to is if it's reproducing, it's naturalized, basically, like it's adapted to the local ecosystem enough to reproduce, and there's enough of it that it can get pollen and stuff like that. And then if it's reproducing and it spreads like wildfire, it's invasive. What does wildfire mean? If I can like just open my eyes as a forester or a natural resources professional and just start picking it out of random parts in the forest. Like this is not a scientifically rigorous system, but it's definitely one where it's like I can quickly decide whether or not a certain plant is has the tendencies. So, like, for example, in our front yard, we have this plant called a blue mist spirea, and my wife grew up in Colorado, and she planted it a lot there, and it had zero tendency to spread. It was nice ornamental shrub. It just kind of did its thing, and that was fine. Moved to the Midwest, was able to find one of these plants, and it is sprouting up all over our garden. Like, we're ripping it out. I'm herbiciding it occasionally if it's in a really bad patch. So we have found our own invasive, and we're trying to control it because we know it's going to get out of control if someone else besides us moves into the area.
Oh, see, that's a fantastic thing. So different plants and organisms behave differently in different ecosystems. So that's something we should always need to remember with non-native plants. And I know this sounds real silly, but different things are different in different places. I know it sounds silly, but it's something we have to always remember as, people. Different things are different. Just nature of things. All right, AJ, what is an invasive species to you?
An invasive species is something that can spread on its own and does so and causes harm. However you want to define harm. Whether that's economic, ecological, both. I care more about the ecological, but yeah, that's my basic definition. If it is not native to an area and it can spread and then cause harm. Now, how it causes harm, we can talk about all the different ways, and I'm sure we will. But that's my real quick and dirty definition for it. I kind of draw the line between, because we might get to this, introduced and naturalized and then invasive, and those are all like, they're different, but the lines between them get kind of blurry. Yeah.
Let's talk about that spectrum. So let's explore that spectrum. So I'm going to put my invasive species, my invasion scientist hat in here. Let's kind of explore that spectrum. So in the world of invasion ecology and invasion science, that's what we call it when we study invasive species. We have 4 general categories that we put organisms into. Now, once an organism is in this category, we have to remember that it can always change categories. So these categories are never fixed. There's always the potential for change. So the first thing we want to think about is native versus non-native. So what is a native plant, guys? What's a native species?
It's something that it's a species that exists in a location without having been introduced by humans.
Okay. This is where I get... Okay, so...
Hold on. We're not going to make this a 45-minute conversation. So
sorry. Okay.
That's a whole other episode. No.
We might, though. We may, though, and I may have to cut it off.
Quick and dirty. All right, so...
What was the question again?
What is a native species? All right, John, you got 2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes. A plant that, at least in North America, it's a plant that has been here since before the Columbian Exchange.
Okay, I like that.
Okay,
I can work with that. So, I work a little bit on an international scale, so I call a native species something that is generally from an area, and you can tell it's from an area because it is incorporated into that ecosystem and plays, well with the other organisms in that ecosystem. So that's how we know it's native. It's got friends, it's got enemies, it's got parasites, it's got parasitoids. It has other relationships in the ecosystem. It doesn't have just like one thing that parasitizes it and that's it. There's other stuff going on. It plays a role in the ecosystem. It's not standing out on its own. It is part of the ecosystem. So that's, for me, that's what a native species is. It's something that plays in the ecosystem. as a group kind of agree on like that is a general definition?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I have questions as usual, and I love clarification.
Yeah.
But as you said, we don't need to make this a college course for 6 hours. So
yeah, no.
Continue.
We'll do the whole dive into native versus non-native and all the funkiness in there. So just as an example, so a non-native species is going to be something that is not from an area, and we can tell it's not from an area because it doesn't play well with others. So for example, tall fescue has been in North America since the initial colonization, so it's been here for like 500-ish years, and there are like a handful of native insects that will play with it. Whereas the oaks, so Quercus, have over 400 different Lepidoptera alone that use oaks. So that's how we can tell, tall fescue, non-native. It doesn't have any friends. The only thing that eats it are cows, and those aren't native. So that's kind of my like native versus non-native. So is that something like a decent definition we can work with?
Yeah.
All right, beautiful.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get into it. So on our spectrum of invasion, we're gonna use like kind of the generally accepted invasion terms. Now there are a few invasive species deniers, and I say go to hell. If you are invasive species denier, stop listening to this podcast. I don't like you. I don't like anything you have to say. Get out of here.
What? Really?
Yeah.
There's those.
Yeah, it exists. Yeah.
Damn it.
I will also say, not all organisms have a right to life. Invasive species, I'm happy to kill them because of the damage they cause. We'll get into that in a second. But so let's go through our spectrum of non-nativeness all the way down to invasion. So the first thing that we have are alien species. So these are going to be introduced species that will occasionally escape, but they cannot reproduce on their own. So, just as an example, there are sometimes people who will release piranhas and other South American fish that look like piranhas into ponds once they get too big for fish tanks. Those can survive for a little while. They usually die pretty quick, but that survival makes them an alien species. It's not that you put it in the pond and it dies. If it survives for a little while, alien species.
Okay, so quick question on this. So would like ringneck pheasants in your neck of the woods count as an alien?
I would say that they used to be naturalized, but because of habitat change, they're now aliens.
Okay.
because they only live for like hours.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
It's like from the last episode, you mentioned that. I was like, yeah, okay. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. So our next one, this is where ringnecks probably get downgraded to. So then there's casual. The other thing is they're intentionally released. So that's another thing. So there's casual alien species. So these are organisms that can escape and then reproduce. So my favorite example of these are goldfish. You can find goldfish in the Great Lakes. They're just a carp. So they can, if you release them into lakes and ponds, they can survive and reproduce. They're usually unable to sustain populations for 10 years. So that's that 10-year cutoff. That's where we're saying this is a casual alien versus an invasive or a naturalized species. They don't have long-term sustaining populations. The next step up the ladder towards invasive, this is the step that I disagree with, is naturalized. So this is an organism that is able to reproduce and spread and it's able to sustain populations for 10 years or more as an alien species. That is a naturalized species. Now, I don't like this definition because to me, if a non-native organism can survive and reproduce and spread, then it's invasive and it's doing ecological damage. We just haven't categorized that.
So I'm going to disagree with that because we've got Scotch pine out here is naturalized, I would say, under your definition.
Yep.
We've planted it for windbreaks or Christmas trees or whatever. It gets to a reproductive age, and it can, if there's enough trees to pollinate, it can reproduce and start reseeding in a couple spots. However, by the time it gets to like 50 years old, because of how our weather patterns work, they tend to die out.
Yeah.
So it's like it's self-replicating, but maybe it's more Yeah, so where would that fit into your
So,
definition?
so
I guess?
that's technically, if you look at the invasion theory, that's a naturalized species. I
Okay.
don't believe in naturalized species because I think that if it's self-replicating and sustaining like that, it's taking up, in this case as a plant, it's taking up growing space and nutrients that could be a native plant. And so it's doing harm to ecosystems. Because it's not a native plant. Like, we could have eastern white pine there, you could have jack pine there, or red pine, or eastern red cedar. So like that's where I don't like the idea of naturalized species. The other thing that I don't like about the idea of naturalized species is it's like, well, these are like kind of part of the ecosystem. I mean, objectively, they're not. Like, Scotch pine like has no friends in the ecosystem. The only thing that plays with it is the Ipsus pine beetle, which is a parasite native to its home range that will kill it. Like, that's the only ecological interaction it has. I mean,
Mountain pine beetle will waste it.
Okay.
They love that shit.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's like crack cocaine for
Well, and then you'll also get birds that perch and nest in it, but like birds nest in houses and perch on power lines.
No, I'm not.
This is not ecological function.
Birds. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I'm disagreeing with it mostly on like the idea of like it's got a predator. The predator is the fact that it's 50 degrees in winter at some point.
It's not a predator.
I know, but I'm just trying to.
Yeah. No, naturalized
so there's some
is
sort
just
of population control.
Yeah.
So, like, Norway maple is another species people will claim is naturalized. Like, oh, it escapes into the ecosystem, but it's not doing, like, much harm. It's like, well, no, it's still doing harm to the ecosystem, because that could be any one of, like, 3 dozen native hardwood species that then plays a larger role.
Because the definition is not, invasive species is not that they cause widespread harm, AJ, right? It's just that they cause harm.
Let's jump to the next step. So invasive species is our next step up. That's the top of the chain when it comes to invasion science. So it can spread over a large area. The definition of an invasive species is all of these things. It's non-native. It's self-replacing for 10 or more years. It can spread on its own. And here's where the addition that makes it invasive. It has the ability to do large impact to economies, to the economies of an area, social use of an area, and or cultural use of an area. In the classical definition of invasive species, ecology and damage to ecosystems is not taken into account. So that's why I don't like naturalized, because I'd say, the Scotch pine is doing damage to my native ecosystem. However, according to classic invasion science, we don't care about damage to ecosystems. We care about damage to humans and human economy.
Gotcha.
That's why I don't like naturalized.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just trying to think of like think of it as like a spectrum of like, if it's naturalized, it's a problem, but it's not like, 5-alarm fire problem, because, we all have limited funds to do things with. And to me, it's like, okay, a Scotch pine, yeah, it's bad. And if it's in an area, I'll do something with it. But like, I would much rather spray some bush honeysuckle or, burning bush or barberry or something like that.
So
I think there's maybe room in there to have like a spatial element to it, that if it's like, it's if a couple of them in a spot is certainly displacing native species, and that's not good. But if they're not spreading to displace native species across a wide area, then maybe that is something that you could call naturalized. Now, how you tell the difference between something that is just naturalized and something that hasn't become invasive yet, I mean, that it's also just probably part of the cycle, unless you have a long history of seeing your windbreaks and stuff just not spreading beyond where you put them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then here's where we get to another issue. We get some propagular pressure in there. So propagular pressure is the theory that like the more of an invasive that shows up, so like the more propagule being anything that's reproductively how a thing reproduces, then like that's another way to get invasion. I'm skipping ahead. We're going to come back to this, but so as you get more and more of these organisms, they're more and more likely to evolve resistance to whatever's keeping them in a naturalized state versus an invasive state. We saw this with hemlock woolly adelgid. It is thought to be cold tolerant, but unable to tolerate deep cold. However, it has slowly evolved tolerance to the negative 30-degree days, which had kept the populations in check. So that's where that naturalized.
Also, we got rid of negative 30-degree days.
Well, there is also that, yeah. Okay, all right. So that's invasive versus alien all the way down. Okay, so our next question on what is an invasive species. All right, this is where we get to have a little bit of fun again on the invasive definition side. T-Bone, you and I actually had a fun little discussion about this way back in the day. So
we did, didn't we?
Yeah, so that is going to be a really fun debate here. So here, let's have a fun discussion about this one. I have a very firm stance on this one. Okay, so hogs. Are they wild hogs or are they feral hogs?
They're feral hogs.
Feral hogs. John, any questions? Feral or wild?
What the fuck is the difference?
So that's the great question. So
I don't know anything.
The question is, can domesticated species become invasive or are they feral? I would say that because it's a domestic species, it's not a wild thing. We have selectively bred them to be one thing versus another. So, like, while feral hogs, I think it's scrofulus, something like that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Continue.
So, like, while they are still genetically the same, same enough to be related to, wild boar, and they can reproduce and hybridize and all that kind of stuff, we have selected that genome so that those pigs reproduce faster. If it's, crazy, as crazy as possible in pigs, but domestics reproduce faster, they grow faster, they have larger litters, and they become reproductive earlier compared to their wild counterparts. So I think it is important from a biological perspective to call domestics that escape feral versus invasive. The other reason it's important to call them out as called domestic species, feral versus invasive, is there's a whole social dynamic that's different. For example, cats. Yeah. I have my lovely little kitty here. Hi, Bella. She is domestic. All of her relatives for the last, thousands of years have been domestic. Yeah, hi, Belle. However, the second she gets outside, she's a little killing machine, and she would kill anything that walks, flies, crawls, or swims.
Yep.
Needs to be controlled. Feral cats kill billions of organisms a year. Need to be controlled.
I also have my cat now.
The second you start talking about, controlling feral cats, in a lethal or non-lethal way, adopting them out, the lethal is what you got to do. People really respond to that. So I think the important thing as managers is feral denotes that we have to treat this in a different way and really think about the social approach to this problem. Sorry, I want to get my thought out.
I mean, I don't disagree entirely, but I think it has the exact opposite impact of what you're saying. I think if you call something feral, people are like, I don't know. At least maybe this is just me and my I guess whatever emotional reaction to the word invasive versus feral. But I feel like people see the word feral and they think, oh well, it's okay because it's something that we made that way. Because it's got that domestic, domesticated aspect to it. I feel like people don't respond to it. I think if we called feral cats invasive cats, you'd be able to get people a lot. Can't talk. You'd be able to get people a lot more on board with killing them.
Okay, I see that.
Same thing about horses. Like Cumberland Island horses. Nobody wants to kill the feral Cumberland Island horses, but if we start calling them invasive, fuck them.
Actually, disagree. I want to kill any feral species out there, but that's
okay. Yeah, no. You're special.
I'm being
special.
pedantic.
You're special. I would say feral is maybe a useful designator for a subtype of invasive species. Okay. I would say all well.
Is it, are we
I was gonna say a feral cat that if you're doing TNR, that cat is not invasive anymore, right? Because it's not reproducing. But feral cats, writ large, could be. I don't know.
But all of this is to say is that domestic species can
Quick question.
damage invasive species. Actually, more damage because they're bred to be more reproductive. Yes, sorry.
Is a Bradford pear an invasive species or a feral species?
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
Invasive because I need to murder it.
I think, based on the way that I have described them, I would have to say it's a feral species. So for everyone, Bradford pears are from a variety. They're bred from a variety of calorie pair that was specifically
It's
chosen.
the trees that smell like cum.
Yep.
Sorry.
Let's
just be brutally honest.
It is
cum
a
tree.
selective and bred for tree. So yeah, I guess according to my own notes, it's feral. Damn, you got me.
Yeah.
This just sounds fucking wrong, right?
Yeah.
Well, because at that point it's like, okay, is it applying to animals or is it just plants?
I mean,
Or
feral
does it
is
not matter?
feral. I think is historically something that we've only applied to animals. My cheeky Bradford pear example aside, I can't think of a plant that we would call feral.
I would say that. So here in the Mid-Atlantic, bird cherry was imported a lot as rootstock in orchards. I call that a feral species because it's a domestic species that was imported for domestic purposes, that being rootstock in orchards, but it escapes. So I would call that feral.
Oh,
if I'm feeling it.
that's probably the best example. Yeah, that's probably the best example of a feral plant.
I don't really care. I'll kill bird cherry when I see it, but I'm not going out of my way to kill it. Okay, so let's just wrap this discussion up. Domestic species, when they escape, can do damage just like, if not more than, other invasive species, and they also need to be controlled just as much, if not more. And I would say that humans are, while we're ultimately responsible for the spread of a lot of invasive species, with domestics, we're even more culpable and responsible for these species. For example, feral horses have no reason to be in North America except for the fact that we released them intentionally and are keeping them
or
on the
stole
landscape.
them in some cases in the 1400s or 1500s.
Yeah.
So if you're a Native American,
but we artificially keep that population around. We could eliminate the feral horse problem if we wanted to, but we don't. Okay, all right. That was a long discussion on feral versus invasive. So let's kind of go through just a little bit of invasion theory. So let's talk about how an invasive species gets here, how it spreads, all that kind of stuff. So there's a proposed unified theory for biological invasion, which is what I follow by Blackburn et al., in case you want to follow along. So it's difficult to become an invasive species.
I disagree. You just need to get planted by every single friggin' nursery, and you win. Question mark, you win, because that's fucking barbary.
Yeah.
Man shakes fist at cloud.
Well, so that's the first step. The first step to something becoming invasive. So every organism lives in its home range. It probably does
is in
okay
location
in
A,
its
needs to get to location B.
Right. And so the question is, how does it get to location A? If you can never get to, how does it get to location B? If you can never get to location B, never going to become invasive. So the first step in stopping invasive species is controlling the movement of species. You do that, you solve invasive species. Species invasion is closely tied to global trade. Organisms are both intentionally moved by humans for ornamental purposes. Tree of Heaven was first imported in the United States as an urban tree because it looked pretty. But they're also moved inadvertently through global trade. For example, the quagga mussel was accidentally released in ballast water. Or earthworms were introduced to most of northeastern United States in ship ballast. It was in the dirt that they dumped off the side of the ship. So a species has to get somewhere. Most species are not going to be introduced to a new place. The second they become introduced, then we get to go through our next stages our next thing. So once a species gets to a new place, it has to survive. If it gets here and dies, never going to become alien. If it survives, it can become an alien species. So it has to survive, then it has to start reproducing. There's a lot, reproduction initially sounds easy, but there's a lot of hurdles you have to go through. For example, if you're a species that is dioecious, so plants, dioecious means two houses, so you have a fruit, a pollen-bearing plant, or with organisms, you have to have a male and female, and a lot of mammals, that kind of stuff. So you can have an all-male introduction of, let's say, a mammalian species, and that introduction is going to fail to ever become invasive. If we just release all stallions on an island, you're never going to have a problem with with horses on an island because they're all going to die out. So you have.
Hang on a second.
Yep.
Hang on a second. Jurassic Park has told me
Yeah.
that nature
reptiles.
finds a way,
What
and
if
I can't
stallions
do
are
the voice.
frogs?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, so that's the reproduction point. And if we look at the red bay ambrosia beetle, so that was a single introduction of a air quotes female because it's an insect that reproduces by parthenogenesis, so it doesn't really have a sex. So parthenogenesis means it reproduces on its own. So if you get reintroduced and you're in a reproductive state, then you can move on to become a casual alien species. So you have to survive and you have to be able to reproduce. And then that reproduction has to be successful. So if you are able to reproduce, like let's say you're the red bay ambrosia beetle, you get to the port of Savannah and you're able to reproduce in the port, but you kill all the trees. So red bay ambrosia beetle kills all of Lauraceae. So you kill all the laurels in the port. Well, you kill the laurels, you don't get to go anywhere. So then you have lived as a casual alien species and you have died as a casual alien species because you killed everything you needed to disperse. So that's the next step. You have to be able to disperse. Sometimes that's done naturally. So the red bay ambrosia beetle flies off to find new species to attack. Sometimes it's done artificially. So again, sticking with red bay ambrosia beetle, killed all the laurels in the port of Savannah. Those trees got cut down, used for firewood. People use them for firewood. They were taking that firewood all over the southeast, and now we got red bay ambrosia beetle all over the southeastern United States. So once you can disperse,
your casual reminder: do not move firewood.
Absolutely.
Continue,
not.
Calvin.
So once you can disperse, now you are a naturalized species. Then once you can survive in that dispersion, so let's say, we take our firewood, we go to a new place, if we burn all that firewood, well then our dispersion effort failed. But if we leave the firewood on site, and the red bay ambrosia beetle is able to emerge and fly away, now we have invasion. It's important to know, though, at each step of this process, you have a very strong chance of not surviving. So if we think of invasion like a big game of D&D, you got to be rolling a lot of nat 20s to survive. Like, most species don't become invasive.
I will say, throughout this entire theory of invasion, I feel like there should be like some sort of Swedish death metal or something like that going on in the background or something like that. I'm not musically inclined, but I feel like there's a nugget of idea in there.
Well, tulips are a great example of this. Like, yeah, they can survive, but they don't disperse. So, like, that's why tulips are never going to be invasive. Like, they're not dispersing on their own.
Well, you have the Dutch.
Well,
there you go.
Yeah, speaking of invasive species, the Dutch. We got them bottled back up, though. We got that invasion under control.
Yeah.
Took a few hundred years. So, that's the thing that's important to remember is most species never get to make it through all these holes, and you can make it through one or two of these and never make it all the way. So going back to your spirea example, that was not going anywhere in Colorado probably because it's hot and dry. Whereas Iowa's more rainy. And so, it was able to survive, but it wasn't able to reproduce or disperse because of, some element with the climate. And so that's why not everything gets to become invasive. You gotta
because you have to have that matchup of you have to have that perfect matchup. So that may be why, like in Ireland, your spruces and your Pacific Northwest, your North American Pacific Northwest species are surprisingly adapted to out there because it's basically the same climate. But for geological reasons, all the conifers died out of Ireland. So something like that.
Something like that. Well,
something like that.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, once a species is able to make it to invasive, the thing that people will notice about them is they're really hard to get rid of. It's like, yeah, man, it jumped through a lot of hoops to get here. Like, you don't get to be a bad, unquote, like a bad species or a weak species and be invasive. It doesn't happen,
Yeah.
Because you had to go.
It's already gone through regular season and playoffs, and now you've got the championship team essentially. Like that species has already dealt with everything that it possibly could face essentially to get to the point of being invasive.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, just adding it onto a layer of that specifically for like the ag side of things, like you got to remember too, like if we're adding like annual ag crops, I'm thinking Palmer amaranth, which is the bane basically of Midwestern farmers right now. It's a giant hogweed, I think it is.
Oh,
it's a giant hogweed. Yeah. Anyways, it's a giant. It produces literally tens of thousands of seeds per maturing rate, and it can mature those seeds if the season is long enough and gets started long enough. It can do 2 cycles in a season, and you can only spray at once, or on the early half of the season before you mess up your crop. And so, like, we've selected for the fastest growing quickest maturing, most herbicide resistant plants because of our cultural techniques out here in the Midwest. And we are getting our lunches eaten by this stupid plant. I mean, and that one's actually an easy one to get rid of. You'd put up a little bit of shade, it's fine. Like, it disappears almost immediately. Like, if you have any amount of, like, that's actually one where shade works, but it's in a bean field in the middle of Iowa. There's no tree for a mile, so it doesn't really work like that, unfortunately.
So let's talk about the invasion curve. So this is when we can start to do things about invasive species. So the best time to do things about invasive species are before they get here. So that is prevention. Prevention. It's also called biosecurity. So when we talk about only using native plants or only buying plants from, local nurseries, that's part of this invasion prevention. We're stopping invasions because we're only using trees that are native to an area or plants that are native to an area. We're only buying them from local nurseries because they're not getting shipped thousands of miles to get here. You can't have an invasion of, for me, black oak, because black oak is native. Like, oh no, my black oak escaped and now I have a more oaky forest around me. Oh no, what a terrible time. So, prevention is number one. It's the cheapest and easiest way to handle invasion, is just don't have the problem. Easiest thing to do.
It's a good thing that historically we've always been really good at prevention.
Oh yeah,
when it comes to problems.
Yeah, especially in the United States, we really invest. We're really invest in making sure our ecological communities are healthy, our people are healthy. We don't immediately just go straight to the emergency room or the herbicide option. I can't make this metaphor more metaphor. So it's just
prevention, as was being mentioned in the United States and Europe, is basically not done. In PA, we have 19 species that are invasive weed list, which is you cannot sell list. It's a joke. Yeah, it really is a joke, considering that we have in PA 200 species of invasive plant, and even the ones that are known and listed as invasive plants by other agencies are not on the cannot sell list, because
I had to talk my mother-in-law out of buying a bush honeysuckle for her yard, because I told her to her face, if you buy this and plant this, I will sneak into your house and spray it one day after work. You can't do this. I don't want to be in business anymore, damn it.
My parents have a burning bush in front of their house. I got no stones to throw here. So prevention, number one. So if you start to deal with localized invasion, so if we're thinking about carp in a backyard pond, so if we take out all the carp, that's eradication. It gets getting to be a little bit more expensive than prevention, but it's still cheap to deal with. So you want to get. So this is also part of the invasion response. So this we call this EDRR, which is early detection, rapid response. So if we find invasions and escapes early and we just eliminate them, I'm using the elimination word here, so we're going to kill stuff. That's the other fun thing about managing invasive species, is we're talking mostly about killing stuff. Yeah, be that plants, be that animals, be it single cell organisms. We're going to have to kill them to protect our whole ecosystem. So if we jump on invasion early, that's the second best time, or we jump on things before they become invasive, that's the second best time to deal with them. That's our eradication. Moving up, this is what most people start to deal with. Eradication basically also doesn't happen in the United States because eradication is difficult because you have to find species, you have to be able to recognize them. So, for example, if we wanted to be better at eradication in the United States, we'd have to have people who are much better at plant identification and telling what was a native versus non-native plant, and saying, oh, hey, that's a non-native plant, I better call somebody. We have somebody that would take the call and then deal with it. We don't have either of those in the country, so eradication.
Oh my God,
really
we have to invest in education and people, and not just emergency services and the plant police, basically.
I was gonna say we need the plant police to just shoot the. Why do they simply not shoot the invasives?
So the closest that I can think of eradication, and this is actually gets more into containment. Containment is just trying to keep invasions to small areas. Is Asian longhorn beetle? So ALB Asian longhorn beetle is it's a lot like emerald ash borer, except it attacks 120 different species of tree and shrub.
Don't say that.
And it flies better
I know
than
that
EAB
academically,
does.
but God.
It flies better than EAB does. It doesn't kill trees as fast as EAB does, but it flies a little bit better. And so there have been like 4 pockets of there are now 5 pockets of ALB in the United States. It's been controlled in 4 of them. The 5th pocket is in the southeastern United States outside of Savannah. And so what happens in that is that once the species is detected, so you have to have someone who's a trained entomologist who can recognize a non-native beetle versus a native beetle, and then they'll call APHIS, which is a USDA bureau that deals with that's the alien plant and what was the H in there?
Animal Plant Health Inspection Service?
Yeah, that's it. Animal Plant. I thought it was alien.
Got it, AJ.
So they deal with a lot of stuff, but in this case, they come in, they say this is ALB, they put in a big containment block, and then you just cut down all of the trees that ALB would attack in the area. You run them through a chipper, and you try to kill all of the Asian longhorn beetle and all its potential hosts within, like, I think for ALB, they started with a 2-mile circle, and it's now expanding. So they just chipped thousands of maples in Savannah.
Hey, good thing APHIS didn't get
defunded
by Doge.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a good thing
all
that.
Wait.
Yeah.
Fucking
Sweet.
Yeah, but this is also why in prevention, like, why you have to throw out oranges when you go through U.S. Customs. Like, this is part of prevention, is maintaining biosecurity. So it's kind of annoying to do, for some folks they find it kind of annoying to do prevention and biosecurity, but it's really important. So there's eradication. Our next stage is containment, so we try to limit the spread of an invasive species. So we just talked about ALB, but another great example are zebra mussels. So in the western United States, they were trying to clean off boats before they went to reservoirs and really prevent the spread of zebra mussels. The problem with containment is it's ultimately never going to work. Like, something's going to get through. So that happened with zebra mussels in the western United States. Like, eventually it's gotten into most of the lakes out there. Someone is eventually not going to clean a boat, or it's going to slip in a boat that wasn't cleaned thoroughly enough, or something. So containment is larger spread. It's more expensive. You're just trying to fight the good fight. And then the last thing on our spread is once you get an invasive species, it's just long-term management. You're never going to fully eradicate an invasive species. You're just trying to keep it to a point where the rest of your ecosystem is functioning to some point around that. It's expensive. There's a lot of things you can do to try to, control them, but you never fully get rid of it. For example, Tree of Heaven is, no matter how much Tree of Heaven I kill in my lifetime, I'm never going to see the end of Tree of Heaven in North America. There's no end to it. So, that's our invasion curve. It's better.
The difference between containment and long-term management is it's
same.
really just scale. It's long-term management is still containment. It's usually small, it's just containment on smaller sites, and maybe write-offs on larger ones where it's super expansive. I think it's also like there's not a set timeline as that process goes on, as you go from invasion and eradication, containment to long-term management. Like, there's not an even space of time between any of those, between when you would start on one part of that process and then move to another. Species could hang out in basically containment for a long time, and then something changes, whether that's cultural, APHIS getting gutted, or environmental, climate change, whatever. Some other species comes along that helps it spread. Now suddenly a species that was maybe able to be contained and was that way for decades can suddenly become much more widespread and fully invasive, if that's the way you want to say that.
So I will say that that's something I noticed, and I'm not sure if it's because it timed out well with my, we'll say, awakening and like learning more about the natural world and stuff like that. But when I was a kid growing up, there were no Japanese knotweed patches in the town where I was growing up, and now every single wetland that's vaguely freshwater, every ditch has a Japanese knotweed patch on it. And I was back in that hometown maybe 8 years ago, and even before that, another 10 years ago before that, I just started noticing it as well. And so like I'm not sure what that trigger event was, because at least for that species, it's typically it has to be a wetter site. Doesn't move into uplands. Usually it's a
I've seen it
riparian
do very
invasive.
well in upland sites, but yeah.
Oh, great, cool, kill me. But anyways, so like I'm not sure like what the triggering event was for that. Was like one of the hurricanes, and it just wrecked through the area, and someone had it as like, oh, this is bamboo, but I can grow it here, and it just exploded after you got however one of the many hurricanes they got in the past 10 years or something like that. I don't know, because I've noticed a lot more recently, and again I don't know if it's my personal like dialing my eye in the past 10 years or if it is actually just getting that bad again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I will say, we'll talk about this in a second here. So one of the things about invasive species, we haven't really talked too much about the theoreticals of why invasive species do well. They definitely are all doing well with climate change. So climate change is both making the climate better for a lot of these species as well as challenging native ecosystems. So invasive species tend not to do well where you have a complete native ecosystem. So let's take garlic mustard, for example. Garlic mustard cannot invade forests that do not have invasive earthworms already in them. So if you have garlic mustard in your forest, it's because you had earthworms. So the earthworms disturb the soil in a pattern that allows garlic mustard to invade, and then they also reduce native plant diversity that also opens up resources that allows plants to invade. So, you have, it's a culmination of factors that allow plants to be, things to like really take off and start doing well. One of them is, the damage to native ecosystems. So think about the Mid-Atlantic, we're really opening up a lot of niches and a lot of resources that could be extracted or it can be utilized by non-native plants, through a dozen or so forest health challenges. So, once we're out chestnut, we're out hemlock, that really starts putting light in the ground, allows non-native plants to do well. Plus, they're already stressed by climate change, and we got deer on top of it, and now we got a great time for all kinds of invasive plants to do well. One thing that I will say, I know this is complete non sequitur. So one thing that had been often hypothesized was that you have the native enemy release hypothesis. So because a non-native species was in its outside of its native environment, it didn't have its enemies. So it's herbivores, it's predators, it's parasites, parasitoids, pests, pathogens, all that kind of stuff. And so the idea was that it's doing well in a place where it doesn't have to deal with those stressors. There's been a lot of great work on it, and it's proven that the enemy release hypothesis was just that. It's just a hypothesis, doesn't actually work out in reality. So how we know enemy release is dead is now a number of invasive plants have been followed by their predators and parasites. So Tree of Heaven has been followed. That invasion has allowed spotted lanternfly to invade, which is a native parasite to Tree of Heaven. At Tree of Heaven is doing just fine, no problems. So the enemy release hypothesis has been pretty well killed as a hypothesis.
So, okay, so on that line,
yeah.
How does so we had someone before APHIS was gutted approach us about EAB control parasitoids.
Ooh,
so
let's talk about
the
that.
little wasp.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we control invasive parasites or invasive species. So let's jump forward. So let's jump into how we control invasive species. So we have what we call IPM. So IPM is integrated pest management. This is a system that's used heavily in agriculture, but we also use it in ecosystems. And so we just use this to control any kind of pest. In this case, we're thinking about invasive species. But we could do this with southern pine beetle. We could do this with tent caterpillar, anything like that. So IPM has a series of steps. So we start with the easiest to do, the cheapest to do. That's going to be cultural control. So what do you guys think cultural control is for invasive species?
Going back to that light idea is just not even light. You're having native ground flora already that reduces the chance.
You're
invasion.
Somehow altering the environment essentially to be uninhabitable by that invasive species.
Yeah. So an example could be we just don't plant Japanese barberry. We're not going to have Japanese barberry problems if we don't plant it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We don't alter the forest in a negative pattern. We as humans make some kind of change. We start valuing native plants and ecosystems more, and so we work to keep those more intact. We garden more with native plants, then we have less problems with native pests and invasive plants. Or sorry, invasive pests and invasive plants. So that's the easiest one to do. It's ideally easy to do on a mass scale because it's just changing cultural norms. Instead of planting Japanese barberry, you can just plant native crataegus, so native hawthorns, nice and sharp.
Well, they don't look as nice,
Right.
Calvin. Have you thought about that?
Right. No,
they
I have.
don't look as pretty and neat.
Yep.
God, fucking.
The
Next time someone says the word neat, I kill them.
The other fun thing about
Actual threats.
native plants in particular, or sorry, invasive plants in particular, one thing people like about them is how long they hold their leaves and how fast they leaf out. That's called extended leaf phenology, so phenology being timing. So invasive plants are evolved for different timing windows, and so they tend to leaf out earlier and keep their leaves longer than native plants, which allows them to do better under climate change. Historically, our plants had evolved for one regime. That regime is changing, and it tends to be changing in favor of the invasive plants. So, in the Midwest, Norway maple would have been broken up by snow loading, but the snow loading is going away. So them holding their leaves longer means they're not as likely to be broken up by snow loading, and they're able to get a few more days of photosynthesis out where they hadn't before. So that's a complete non sequitur. Okay, our next step in invasive species control are what you just talked about, John, biocontrols.
Oh, hell yeah.
So biocontrols. What's a biocontrol, guys?
Well, I just said it was the parasitoid wasp that controls the emerald ash borer. So it's a little wasp that's, not microscopic, but it's tiny. It doesn't bite humans or anything like that. But it lays its eggs and eats, and those eggs when they hatch, they eat their way out of the ash borer beetle, and it acts as a natural, in air quotes, control, I guess. Is it natural? I don't know.
Wait, I think we skipped a step though, didn't we?
Nope.
Did we skip over mechanical?
Oh yeah, we'll come back to mechanical. Yeah, okay, we did skip mechanical. Okay, yeah, so let's just talk about biocontrols, then we'll get back to mechanical. So AJ, biocontrol. What's your experience with biocontrols?
Not very successful, any of them.
Yep. So biocontrol just means a biological control. So just like John was saying, it's any kind of agent that, could be a predator, could be a parasitic wasp, could be a virus, bacteria, protozoa, whatever, that can kill your target species. They need to be host specific. So you don't want to import, let's say, so here's a great example. So the prickly pear cactus is invasive in the Caribbean. So they imported a cactus moth that kills it. Fantastic control for prickly pear. However, it's the moth they imported was a pretty broad spectrum moth, and they accidentally got blown to the southeastern United States, and they're now they're now feeding on and killing a lot of native cacti in the southeastern U.S. So
wait, so this is the cane toads thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
So the idea is you have some kind of damaging agent that's going to control your target species and just your target species. The thing is, this can happen.
There's not that many species out there that only eat one thing.
Yeah. So that's part of the thing. The other thing is it takes a lot of work and study to find these species. So, for example, purple loosestrife has got some of the most successful biocontrols that I can think of. So you have the purple loosestrife beetle. So to find a biocontrol, you have to go back to that organism's home range. So in this case, with purple loosestrife, you have to go back to Europe. In Europe, purple loosestrife, it's there. It's not the most common plant. It's there. It's around. So you have to find the plant in its host range, and then you have to it takes roughly 10 to 20 years to develop biocontrol. So you have to find it in its home range. You have to study that plant in its home range. You have to find all the parasites, predators, and parasitoids and disease agents. You have to identify them in that plant in its home range. And then you have to study their life cycles and to see how they work. Can you, because if you have, let's say, a leafhopper beetle, or like with the purple loosestrife beetle, so we have a beetle, is this something that we can grow in a lab? Okay, if we have to find it, we have to identify it. That's usually, most of these species are pretty understudied in their home ranges because they tend not to be a big problem in their home range, because they got all kinds of stuff on them. So you have to find the species, you have to identify everything on it, you have to describe a lot of species that are new to science, because a lot of organisms have not been fully described to science. Then you have to study it, and you have to figure out how to grow it in a lab. Then once you do all that, then you can import it back to the U.S., and then you have to grow it in a lab in the U.S. So with the purple loosestrife beetle, you have to collect it, you have to grow it in a lab in Germany, you have to fly it to the U.S., it has to survive that flight, and then you have to be able to grow it in a lab in the U.S. Yep. And the thing that we have to remember is these are organisms, so shit just dies sometimes.
Yeah.
So it has to make that flight, and then no two labs are the same. So you can have the procedure from Germany, which says it needs to be 32 degrees Celsius in the grow chamber, like it may need to be 32 degrees Celsius and 30% humidity. And you didn't know the 30% humidity part, and the Germans weren't measuring that, so your purple loosestrife beetles just die because you didn't know the moisture part. But okay, you get that figured out. So you figure out how to grow it in the U.S. in your lab. Then you have to test it against all of the native plants and organisms that could be impacted, and things that probably won't be impacted. All biocontrols need to be tested against a number of agricultural products, including bees. So we did some work on a Bohemian knotweed control, and it was this beetle, and you had to test it on bees to make sure it wasn't going to impact honeybees. And it's like, yeah, dude, it's a herbivore beetle. It's not going to hurt bees, but you had to release it with the honeybees to make sure. So you have to cultivate it, you have to test it against all of our native stuff, and then you have to release it, and then you have to hope that it is successful in the release, and it can start to grow on its own. So purple loosestrife beetle, you can do all that with, you can release it, and it will reduce purple loosestrife populations between 80-90% where you have dense invasion. That's great, right? 80-90% reduction? Yeah. That's great. Are we happy with 80-90% reduction?
It makes my job
better than zero.
Easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll take it. That's 80 or 90% of the plants that I don't have to kill. But that's still 10% out there.
But?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's plenty.
Yeah. And so that is the thing that we have to remember when it comes to biocontrols, is that they are just that. They are just controls. Biology never works to wipe out a species. If you had a perfect predator for an organism, the predator wouldn't exist because it would have eaten all of its prey. You never get a thing that's going to be 100% successful because then it eats itself out of house and home. So that's just something we have to remember with biocontrols, is they are just that. They are at their best controls. At their worst, it's like, so...
They're a new invasive species.
Yeah, that's at their absolute worst. We haven't done that in a long time. Yeah. But so we have...
I'm going to add cane toads to the chart.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done that in a while, but it definitely happens. It has happened. So we have in the Mid-Atlantic, we have multiflora roses, an invasive rose species. We have a native virus, it's called rosette disease, that will damage and kill roses. I got a picture on the screen that the other guys can see. There is a field of multiflora rose in front of me, and one of them is bright red when the other are green. That one plant has rosette disease and is slowly dying. Yeah, it's going to take
slowly
3 to 4 years for it to die of rosette disease, and it's not going to spread to these other plants. So, that's at its worst. It's okay, we killed one plant out of 1,000? Who cares? Who cares? So, biocontrols. Sometimes they work really well, sometimes they don't. At their best, they're going to give you some level of control. They're never going to eradicate the target species. Okay, we skipped mechanical control because I want to talk about biocontrol instead. So, mechanical control is pretty straightforward, does what says in the tin, just any physical control of an invasive species. How do you guys like my machete?
It's cute.
It's very cute.
Look at that notch it just whacked out of it.
Yeah.
Oh God, I didn't even notice that.
And the blade is
I've got it
big old chunk out of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So mechanical control, that's cutting, pulling, just physical control of things. That works for some species. So if we're thinking invasive deer, what is that invasive deer they have in Maryland?
They've got invasive deer in Maryland?
Yeah, it's a swamp deer.
Oh no.
It's not.
What? I'm Googling this now.
Yeah. But that would be shooting them. Shooting invasive deer. They got Himalayan tar in Texas. Just shooting them. Physical removal.
Oh, feral hogs, right?
Yeah, feral hogs, shooting them. Yeah, shooting them, trapping them, anything you physically remove them, pulling.
Oh, they've got sika deer.
Yeah, that's it, sika deer.
Oh, okay.
What the fuck? Why do they need more deer?
They were released by some rich guys to hunt them.
And they actually established.
Yeah, and they actually. And it's a managed hunt now because.
Of course it is.
Yeah, you
sure.
should just eliminate them. So yeah, mechanical control, pretty easy. It's easier and cheaper to do than biocontrol, because you don't have to spend 10 million on average now to develop biocontrol. It costs between 10 and $20 million. It takes about just as long, because you have to spend a lot of time
and it's
studying
woke now
species.
too, so you can't fund it.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta have the scientists, and they're woke and gay. So shout out to all my gay and ecologists out there. What's up? I'm happy for you. Okay. Prescribed fire is the mechanical control. AJ, you deal a lot with prescribed fire. How do you feel about prescribed fire and invasive species?
It is great for keeping many invasive species from spreading. It is very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to even locally eradicate almost any invasive species with fire. I can't think of a single one that we deal with that like just adding fire to the mix would get rid of it once it's there.
Yeah. No, that's about how I feel about prescribed fire. The thing that I think that is best about prescribed fire and invasive plants in particular is it gives you fantastic access to them.
It does do that.
Yes.
So
I mean, like anything else, it's a tool in the toolbox, but not a single use.
I think for us, so I think for us, a lot of stuff we're dealing with is prairies and prairie grasses, and doing a spring growing season burn or even a burn in the summertime sometimes, like that really invigorates our native grasses, or they can shrug it off relatively well because they're that well adapted, but it can really knock back some of our invasive plants, especially the more into the growing season you can do it, the more damage to invasive species you do. And usually the natives can either shrug it off or resprout next season without missing a beat. And what we found is like reed canary grass, if you do, depending on when you time it, you can do a lot of damage to it, but that timing is really, really tricky. And if you're off by a week, you can do almost nothing to it.
Oh, that's a fantastic
That's interesting.
point. No, that's a great point.
Really cool.
Timing is really important, as well as intensity of fire. Because if you burn everything down to the dirt, you can just, open up resources for invasive plants to come in. And some invasive plants like fire.
Yeah. That's the huge, the huge caveat is, if you're Melaleuca, Kogon grass, any of those, climbing fern to an extent, especially climbing fern if you're burning it when the spores are, out.
But I think that's a great point there, John. Like, using it as a tool to maintain ecological integrity is a great thing, because an intact ecosystem is much harder for these non-native plants to invade. I know we've talked a lot about the strength of these, organisms, but if you have intact ecosystems, it's difficult for them to get established. Or if they get established, it's difficult for them to become a major component of them. Keeping ecosystems native and natural is the best way to prevent invasion.
So, some of the even like a restored prairie, like some of the best like defense in air quotes against like a thistle invasion has been like just burn it once. Like even though you're opening up that seed bed to potential more thistles coming in, the sprout back associated with the prairie grasses is enough to basically smother the thistles sometimes. Like it's that impressive.
Hell yeah.
And since the roots are so big and they take up so much growing space, anything that gets established is going to have to fight a lot of prairie root to get going. So that's hands down the best thing is going back to that, prevention is the best. What is it? A pint of prevention is a pound of cure. Like, just have a healthy understory. You've solved 50% of your problems. And if you have an effective federal government that can, keep a check on imports and stuff like that, that's 25%. And then 25% is a local population of people that just likes native plants and knows what to look out for. Hey,
that's what the tariffs will do. Is then they put tariffs on everything, and then there's no more imports.
I mean, that's actually
Okay, so speaking,
barberry costs $2 billion.
Speaking of our tariffs, let's talk about our last control source, which is One that we
This is
reach
gonna make
for a
me
lot
sad.
because it's
Liberal
really
tears.
effective.
Yeah.
Chemical
Oh, shit.
control.
Oh man, if we could kill plants with liberal tears, man, we'd be set. I'd be crying all day long.
Whoa, I'm not a lib. Hold on, don't call me that. So chemical control is our last thing that we reach for. It's the last thing we reach for because it is expensive. You're going to impact non-target things. So like when you're doing mechanical control, like when you're pulling individual plants, you're ideally not going to impact things. With good chemical control, you're ideally not going to impact many non-targets, but you still can, and you're more likely to than with other treatments. I mean, obviously, if a biological goes wrong, then it goes wrong in a really bad way. But chemical control is the last thing we reach for. It's like we charge like $200 an acre to do invasive species control with chemicals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At least $200 an acre.
Yeah.
At this point,
Yeah.
it's that bad in some places.
Yeah. I mean, the glyphosate ain't cheap, man. And then I got to walk around. So when you do chemical control, is as a forester for invasive plants, you strap on a backpack sprayer or a mist blower, and you physically walk every single acre of a property, and you need to set foot on every single foot of ground and spray every single target plant. So like you gotta spray every single freaking privet in a forest that could have 6,000 privet per acre, and so that's chemical control. We reach for it a lot. It is, when you do it right, it is very effective. You get 90%. Ideally, you're getting 90% control in that first year, and then eradication the second year. Then you can come back and fight the seed bank. But ideally, you're getting 90% control, and that's you putting foot on every single foot of ground on a property. And that's not to talk about aquatic stuff, because aquatic you got to drive around and spray chemicals in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole can of
That's
worms
a whole
we can't get
different
into.
thing.
I don't want to do that.
And chemical control does not work on every invasive species. Excuse me. For example, earthworms, there's no chemical defense. You can put down mustard, and that'll drive up some earthworms from like a couple of feet of soil, but there's no chemical control for earthworms. For like hemlock woolly adelgid, I have a imidacloprid that I can use on trees, but there's a per acre limit that I can apply before I start really damaging the ecosystem. And like I can't physically, I literally can't treat all of the trees in a forest. You just can't do it. It's expensive. It's time consuming, and you're with like imidacloprid, I'm going to impact other parts of the ecosystem. So I'm limited, and I don't want to do it because I'm happy.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
At least for me, it's like it is 80. Like in your photo here, you're wearing, impenetrable rubber gloves that, after you have to refill your backpack, you can tip out, a couple thimblefuls of the most disgusting water and sweat of your life. You're wearing rubber boots, which are not, again, impenetrable, so there's no breathing there.
Got safety glasses on.
You got safety glasses on. You've got, some sort of hat, you've got, in a perfect scenario, you've got, really long sleeves, sometimes a jumpsuit as well, depending on safety stuff. And you're trying to walk through all this shit, and it's miserable.
Yeah. When I'm going well, I can do 1 to 1.5 acres an hour. That's me going well.
Terrain.
Yeah. So
and density.
Yeah, it's time consuming, and it's not easy, and that's why it's the last tool they reach for. And then, like, you can have problems. Like, if you use 2,4-D, then you can have flash up and things you didn't treat. So there's a lot of things to think about with chemical control. We're going to do a whole other episode on chemicals and glyphosate and all that kind of stuff. But just know, it is ideally the last tool in the toolbox when it comes to IPM. And the other thing that I'm going to close out on is, like, when we're discussing chemical application in forests, these are usually very targeted application, like a spot spray. Sometimes we do larger non-target applications, so like mist blowing or spraying large areas with.
Sometimes we do broadcast spraying for like a new plantation.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can.
Well, that's not IPM.
About...
So hang on. So like, okay, when I say plantation, AJ, you're probably thinking, oh, it's a loblolly. You're immediately thinking of a loblolly plantation. It matures in 7 years. When I say plantation, it's a diverse mixture of hardwoods.
Oh, I wouldn't call that a plantation. I call that a planting.
Okay, so okay,
Yeah, I mean,
plantation is
planting
single
then, yeah.
species,
Yeah.
largely.
yeah. So I mean,
But no, I mean, but there are certainly instances where we've broadcast herbicided for some invasive species because it's 2 acres of mostly privet,
Yeah.
or 2 acres of
Quackgrass.
So fuck
this
it.
photo here is like, yeah, I got all the multiflora, but then I have to come back and get the Japanese stiltgrass. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a broadcast application where I'm going to kill a lot of stuff because that's how Japanese stiltgrass grows. It's going to take over this whole forest understory, and so I'm accidentally going to kill some things. That's just the nature of chemical control, and that's the nature of trying to battle some of these, invasive species.
And real quick, I want to something to bring up. Like, we said chemical is the last tool you reach for, except I would argue most of the time when we're dealing with invasive species, it's already gone past any of those other tools,
Yep.
right? Like, it's the last tool
Yeah.
we reach for, but it's also very often the first tool we reach for because it's the only one left when we're at the point of, oh shit, we actually need to do something about this.
Yeah.
Like, the point where you could mechanically control the fucking Chinese tallow, for example, which pulls really nicely. If the little seedlings, you pull those right out of the ground, super easy. Don't, the roots don't break when they're young, and it's just that little tap root. It's great if you can do that. But at the point where you're deciding to do that, it's probably too late.
Well, I mean, the same thing with like garlic mustard. Like that's you can eat
Yeah.
that sucker.
Oh yeah, that
like,
pulls super nice.
It pulls great. It's obvious. It smells specific. Like it's a great like thing for kids and volunteers to do. But like they can do a couple acres, and I have 1,500 acres that has garlic mustard on it. So a lot of times that broadcast herbicide is just gonna be the first thing that's gonna be the best option. Initially. Also, if I'm battling garlic mustard, I've won everything else, and I'm celebrating. So, yeah.
Yeah. So these are all great points. I think just the last thing that I want to talk about is when we're talking about using herbicides in natural settings, this is not like the massive application that people are thinking of with like farms. We're talking about in forest settings, the maximum application of glyphosate is 96 fluid ounces per acre. That's 0.002 fluid ounces per square foot. It's not a lot. Not a lot.
The thing to remember is whatever, if you live in Iowa, you're downwind of way more shit when, Farmer Bob goes by on his sprayer.
Even in my settings where it is more true plantation, pines and that sort of thing, where you are, perhaps people are regularly ban spraying for competition control and that kind of thing. It is still those extremely low rates compared to any kind of I was going to say agriculture, but we had that talk last time. Row crop, let's say.
Yeah.
Setting.
Yeah.
The rates are just so much lower. So even in the few instances where we are kind of hosing it down, we're not really.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of water, but also like if you're doing a band spray too, it's like you're banding over trees, but like you still have a 6-foot gap sometimes between the next row of trees. So it's like it actually is, like 1/6 of an acre or whatever that it actually ends up being applied to rather than an entire acre. So it's even less than you think it is.
Okay, so that was how we control invasive species. So let's just wrap up on a kind of a note why we do this. So we kill invasive species not just because they're there. That's not a reason to do anything. We kill them. We're taking lives.
It's a
here.
jobs program.
Yeah,
it's a jobs program.
I do love to joke with folks that it's my forever. I got great job security because we keep bringing them in. So we're killing stuff.
Put me out of business.
Yeah, I'd love that. So we're killing stuff not just to kill things. We're killing some species to benefit the whole ecosystem. So let's think here. Let's take a look at some work from Doug Talamay. He's in Maryland. So looking at the species diversity. So as a measure of species diversity, we often use Lepidoptera. Those are moths and butterflies. We use those as a measure of insect diversity because they're easy to measure and they're easy to identify. Caterpillars tend to be a lot more unique than beetles, and wasps. Oh my god, there's a million. There's a species of parasitic wasp for everything in the world, and you have to get the microscopes out to identify. So caterpillars are much easier to identify than wasps. So we use caterpillars. So Lepidoptera are often our measure of species diversity. So your native oaks in the eastern United States can support over 500 species of Lepidoptera. Chestnut has the least diversity supported by any tree species, and that's probably because chestnut is largely eliminated from the landscape and difficult to study, and most of its obligate insects are now extinct. That's my caveat. That supports over 100 known species of Lepidoptera, even though chestnut's functionally extinct. Like,
I was gonna say, like, that's pretty good for a functionally extinct species. That's like a grove here, a grove there, separated by 1,000 miles or whatever. Like, that's pretty damn good.
And really, I mean, if you look at it a different way, how many chestnut species are there in the U.S.?
One. Well, there's one that's native. There's
one native. Yeah. How many oak species are there in the
U.S.? Chinese chestnut, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like when you're looking at it like that, the way these are broken down, like it's doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to take away from chestnut. The roses. So let's take ash. Ash is again like 150-ish known species of Lepidoptera. Pretty good, 100. So we'll take tree of heaven. It's been in the United States since 1700. It supports one species of Lepidoptera. That's a non-native species of Lepidoptera, and that would be spongy moth.
Yeah.
So that's why we kill invasive plant species. We kill invasive plants to support native insects, which support whole ecosystems. We're not just killing a tree of heaven to kill a tree of heaven. We're killing a tree of heaven to give life to all of these other ecosystems and these organisms. There's a great study that just came out looking at native bird decline in North America. There's like 500 species of native bird they're looking at, and they found on average a 75% rate of decline. A lot of that is driven by a lack of food for birds. That food is both from plants and things that eat plants. And our native insects cannot feed on invasive things. They don't feed on the leaves of invasive species. They don't feed on the fruit from invasive species. So if you want to have native Lepidoptera, which support native birds, you have to have native plants.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's the thing that people forget is that birds don't really eat that many nuts and like seeds.
Oh
and
my
stuff
god!
like
If
that,
I have to freaking
90%.
explain to someone why they need to care about a plant that doesn't produce a nut or a fruit one more time, I'm gonna lose it.
Well, let's talk about that. So, another example of an invasive plant that's actively detrimental to native species is again going back to our starter species. So Chinese tallow. So the leaves of Chinese tallow, when they break down, they change the pH, and they have some other chemicals in them that if they break down in vernal pools and native wetlands, it changes the chemistry of that water, and it kills native amphibians and lowers amphibian diversity. So just having Chinese tallow on the landscape is actively killing native amphibians. So it's killing.
It's like the acidification in like the UK of like they've got all their conifer plantations or whatever, and I mean also like basically Europe in general, but like they've got all of those conifer plantations, those exotic spruces that are all acidifying because conifer needles are naturally acidic, and they're all of their streams are a little bit more acidic than they can be or should be to support their native fish.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can do this with a number of invasive species. So the last example I want to talk about is our cedar waxwing. So cedar waxwing, wonderful migratory bird, a little like cardinal-ish size, northern cardinal size, a little bit bigger. They have this, so the males have this brilliant wing bar on them. So that wing bar is bright red in our color spectrum. In the cedar waxwing, they can see UV light, and so it's got a really unique color to them. And when cedar waxwings feed on bush honeysuckle, these are it's a variety of invasive. It's four invasive honeysuckles. When they feed on those berries, they have different micronutrients in them, and it changes the color of that wing bar. It changes it noticeably for humans, but very notably for female cedar waxwings. And the females do not find the males sexy, and it lowers the fecundity of cedar waxwings. Just the micronutrients in the bush honeysuckle berries.
The other one with because cedar waxwing is the other invasive species, or maybe naturalized. I would argue invasive though. Nandina. golden bamboo. Cedar
bamboo.
waxwings will eat the shit out of those berries, and if they only ate a few of them, it would be fine. But waxwings, their feeding habits are just to literally gorge themselves on
gorge
whatever's
themselves,
in front of them. And there's enough of I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the actual compound is in the Nandina berries, but there's something in there where they eat enough of it, it'll kill them. That's not great.
Yeah.
That's not great.
No.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
And if we look at
Also, hang on, just to add to our podcast grudge match, we'll say, golden bamboo. I'm just looking it up to, just try and get an idea of what it looks like.
It's not a bamboo.
Walmart. I'm gonna commit crimes.
Yep.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I'm angry.
The bamboo, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, so invasive plants, invasive organisms are bad in all kinds of things. We focused a lot on plants today because you got two foresters. We could do the same thing. We have a whole episode that we're doing on feral hogs, the damage of feral hogs due to ecosystems. Another one on feral horses. So, these organisms, while they seem small, they have massive impacts. Ecosystems are, finely balanced things. And once you start throwing these big disruptions at them, they start having real issues. And once they have the couple of real issues, then you have more invasives, and it just becomes a worse and worse problem. There's a reason that we think and care about these invasive species. There's a reason I will spend my entire summer killing invasive species. It's not because I like doing it. I do not like, being out in an 80-degree day with a 70-pound backpack full of herbicides on my back. I don't like that.
It's miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I do it because the native plants need it, and the native birds need it, and the wildlife needs it. That's the only reason I walk around with herbicides all day. So that was a quick primer on invasive species. Remember, anything can be invasive given the right set of circumstances, though most things will not become invasive because it is difficult to do. Guys, do we have any closing thoughts here as we start our invasion journey?
I just love that we always say this is a quick such and such as
I know.
as the goes past an hour and a half minimum.
Yeah.
Hey, under an hour
God, it's
45.
almost 2 hours. Fuck.
Under an hour
I'm
45,
gonna
baby.
die.
Okay. All right, AJ, closing thoughts here.
Closing thoughts. Just don't spread invasives. Don't bring shit from other places. Don't move firewood. If it doesn't look like it belongs, maybe look it up and see if it belongs, and if it doesn't, kill the shit out of it.
John, closing thoughts.
There are tons of resources for this stuff. If you're in the continental United States, or not the continental, if you're in the United States, the extension services of your state, if you Google my state here, extension, invasive plants, there's tons of resources, almost to an overwhelming degree. If you want to know what's what, there are tons of apps that help you identify this stuff. If you want to start, checking around your house, there are tons of consultants, forestry consultants. Honestly, if someone in a suburban area said, "Hey, I've got this tree. Is it, invasive?" If they buy me a 6-pack of beer or hand me a 20, to poke around their neighborhood and figure out what's invasive, I'll do it. There are tons of resources available, and more importantly, there are tons of native plants that basically act the same way, but are better for the environment. So, like, we have burning bush. That was one we mentioned. There's a plant called the Eastern Wahoo. It's a native plant. It has the same bright, bold colors and stuff like that. Roughly the same form. Has a highly nutritious berry for the migratory birds and is native.
And it has a way better name.
And it has a way better name. And so, like, there are these things available. I wish I could just throw a book at listeners and stuff like that. And just, I have literally a spreadsheet for a church that I work with that's like, hey, if you want to replant, this hedgerow of shrubs, here's a list that you guys can plant around a cemetery or something like that. Like, I just have that to throw at people because everyone's like, well, what do I plant? I'm like, I have so many ideas. Just ask me. I don't care. Just ask me. I will help you. Almost for free usually.
Yeah.
If you're in the U.S. and you want to know more about invasive species and want to maybe get some help identifying them and just learn more about them, I mean, the quick and easy answer, invasive.org. It's real easy. It's
Okay,
not
yeah.
not it's one of the few websites that you can just say on a podcast and people will be able to like, oh yeah, I can remember that and type it in. You don't have to go through
Yeah.
all the weird URLs and stuff. It's just go there, look around, poke around. It looks like a website put together by people who don't design websites, which is what
But
you'd
still,
expect.
it's
But
important.
it works
Yep.
good.
Good.
Now I will say, here's my wrap up. So we had a great conversation about invasive species. There are a couple of things I want to point out. One, invasive species can be invasive anywhere. So we've talked about a lot of European, Asian, and African species that are invasive in North America. North American species are invasive everywhere. So black locust is found across the world. It's one of the most invasive plants in the world. Northern red oak is very invasive in a lot of Europe. And pokeberry, or pokeweed, is found all over the place as a highly invasive species. So American stuff gets everywhere. North American stuff gets everywhere. It all goes everywhere. It's just a question of, how much time do you spend in European ecosystems? If you don't spend a lot of time in European ecosystems, you're probably not seeing invasives. But if you do, you'll see a lot of invasives. The other thing is, people can get real racist when we start talking about invasive species.
Oh yeah.
Very few times has someone from one of these countries intentionally imported a species for it to be intentionally damaging. Sometimes people will bring plants from home. The Europeans were especially fond of doing that with acclimatization. Was it acclimatization or these societies where they wanted to make the new places they live look like home. So European starling was imported because a dude wanted to have all of the birds of Shakespeare in New York City. So now we have starlings across all of
Awesome.
North America.
Great, buddy.
Norway maple was imported into North America as people wanted the trees from back home, and that would be European, Norway maple. Like Europeans just call it maple because they have like 2 species of maple. So everything can be invasive, and there's no reason to get racist about invasive species. Do not be proud that your species is invasive somewhere else, and do not blame another group or ethnicity for importing a species. They probably, it was done if it was done intentionally, it was done by someone who lives where you live, not someone from somewhere else. And then my last thought here is, so in North America, we have very set opinions about invasive species, at least among us. That's why we are all hanging out together. If I didn't agree with these guys on their opinions about North America or invasive species, we wouldn't be talking. Not everyone shares that belief. I've done some work with some colleagues in China who have been trying to import North American species because they view them as better, because they're more productive. The Europeans love importing North American species, as we mentioned, with like Sitka spruce, and actually redwood planted a lot in Europe for plantations. You have the same issues with invasive species. It's don't do it. Don't do it.
The only difference is it's 3 dudes from America talking instead of 3 dudes from your other country.
Yeah.
Insert other country here.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Yeah.
Is our context is the eastern United States, not the west coast of Kenya or something like that. Is Kenya on this ocean? I think it is.
Yeah, sure.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, don't import invasive species, no matter how productive that species is from a timber perspective, from a fruiting perspective. It's not worth it. Don't do it. All right, so with that as a closing note, invasive species is bad. We don't want to have them. We're going to have a lot more conversations about invasive species, including we're going to talk about horse management and management of feral horses in North America. AJ, do you want to give us a little primer about what our next episode will be on?
What is our next episode? Is that mine? Is that the
Yeah.
wildlife
Yes.
management? Next episode's going to be on wildlife management, what that entails, what that looks like. Mostly going to be looking at North American wildlife management because that's what I know and what I do. But we'll do a little bit of a compare contrast with some other philosophies, let's say.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Well, thank you for
I can't wait to learn more.
spending some time with us and learning about invasive species. Okay. With that has been an episode. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later.